Nous allons donc démarrer le premier panel de la journée, un panel qui va parler de la naissance d'une nouvelle industrie d'exportation. Et nous aurons dans ce panel M. Luc Chapuis, senior vice-président gaz et énergie à faible teneur en carbone de Technique Énergie, Dr Ayodele Oni, partenaire Bloomfield, Per Magnus Nisven, cofondateur, partenaire senior et chef d'analyse à Rystad Energy, Mustapha Béchir, directeur général des hydrocarbures au ministère du pétrole, des mines et de l'énergie de la République islamique de Mauritanie. Vous pouvez nous rejoindre, s'il vous plaît. Nous allons donc démarrer ce panel qui sera modéré par Bimbola Kolawole, Senior Business Development Manager for Africa at Rystad Energy. We'll kick off by a short video presentation by Rystad Energy and a gas market review presentation by the International Energy. And then we'll join Jean-Baptiste Dubreuil from International Energy Agency on Zoom. So if everything is okay, Andrew? Okay, thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Kaushal Ramesh. I'm a senior analyst at Rystad Energy's Gas and LNG Markets Research Division, and welcome to our presentation about why we believe that as far as FLNG is concerned, this is West Africa's time to shine. So, ever since the invasion of Ukraine, we've seen some very bullish trends in LNG demand. The reduction in Russian gas supplies to Europe has created an urgent step change in European LNG demand, basically from just over 70 MTPA in 2021 to over 110 MTPA each year, starting now all the way to 2030. The nature of this demand is for energy security, which means it is government-backed and will probably be supported irrespective of the price. This step change in demand means that we still need about 110 MTPA more of new LNG projects by 2030 to be able to supply a global demand of over 620 MTPA. And this is even though we have seen some recent FIDs of US LNG projects. So we need more projects and we need them fast, but the supply side has some downside risks. The exit of the various international partners and oil field service companies from Russia means that Russian LNG production could decline, and other large under construction projects may suffer either from cost inflation, labor shortages, or in the case of Mozambique Area 1, continuing security concerns. And if we account for the full downside risk to supply, then we may see a supply deficit of over 150 MTPA in 2030. Now, West Africa is uniquely positioned to be able to support this demand. Firstly, the characteristics of the available resource base is optimized for FLNG, meaning there are multiple marginal fields which have less than 4 TCF of reserves. And these are too small for onshore developments, but can be optimally monetized through an FLNG. On this map, we're talking about multiple assets across West Africa that are in the various planning and development phases. This makes up about 3 TCF in Congo, Brazzaville, about 9 TCF in Nigeria, 1.2 TCF in Senegal, and 4.6 TCF in Mauritania. This does not even consider the potential of greater expansions at the Greater Tortue Main project or the gigantic potential of Yakar Teranga or Bir Allah. Now, West Africa is also optimized from a location standpoint because trips to Europe would take between 6 to 10 days, depending on the origin country. Trips to South Asia would take between 14 to 18 days, and East Asia would take between 22 to 25 days. So not only does the West African region add to some diversity in the global LNG supply mix, it is also either equivalent or better than the travel time from US Gulf Coast projects to most of these large LNG consuming regions. So West Africa can make good use of their Goldilocks resource base and their Goldilocks location. Now, FLNG itself was previously considered a frontier technology, but now with 3 facilities operating reliably, that is, and Coral FLNG commissioning now in Mozambique, that is no longer the case. In addition to shedding the frontier technology tag, FLNG projects have also demonstrated great versatility across a wide range of field types, including the management of liquids and condensate production. And with the startup of Coral FLNG, we would have seen the proof of concept across a wide range of water depths as well, from onshore projects to now with Coral ultra deep water projects. Now, FLNG also has the advantage of speed to market because if done right, projects could be on stream in less than 3 years. Most of the construction work would be overseas, and offshore location means that it mitigates the risk of most types of security threats and land ownership issues. And that's why Coral FLNG is already commissioning in Mozambique, and ENI are now considering a second FLNG off the coast of Mozambique. So finally, when it comes to West African FLNG as a whole, Gola Cameroon was a pioneer proof of concept for FLNG conversions. They will probably ramp up to the full 2.4 MTPA of capacity before the end of this decade. Greater Tortue Ahmeyim Phase 1 is under construction, and New Fortress and UTM Offshore are progressing their projects in Congo, Brazzaville, and Nigeria FLNG, respectively. So, so before the end of 2030, we should be able to see between the operational, under construction, and planned projects over 8 MTPA of FLNG production from West Africa. And if we consider expansions in Greater Tortue Ahmeyim or the potential return of Fortune FLNG, we could see production of over 12 MTPA, and that would make up over a third of FLNG production globally. And again, this does not yet consider the potential of Yakar Teranga or Birala, who could have FLNG projects as part of their broader development concepts. So based on everything we've said now, West Africa has what it takes to become the FLNG capital of the world, and the time to make it happen has never been better.
Good morning. Unlike my boss, who had spent 10 years of his life in France, I've only spent, I would say, an average of 2 weeks in total in France. Okay, I guess I can continue. Oh, you can't hear the speaker. Okay, can everyone hear me? Is it good now? Oh, perfect. Okay. So I was saying, unlike my boss, Per Magnus, who you've just met, who spent 10 years of his life in France, hence his really fantastic French. I've only spent an average of 2 weeks in France, so I apologize. I only speak English. Okay, they still can't hear me. Okay, I can only hear you, can't hear the speaker, but okay. I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Bimbola Kolawole, and I'm the Business Development Manager for Rystad Energy, and I also head the African market at Rystad Energy. And it's my pleasure to moderate this session this morning on the topic of the birth of the new export industry. I've got with me 5 gentlemen, and I would like them to introduce themselves. If I would like to start with the first person on my immediate left.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I hope it's coming out loud and clear. My name is Gaspard Mendy. I'm the MD of Gore Offshore Engineering, which is a local Senegalese oil and gas service company.
My name is Mustafa Bashir. I'm the Director General of Hydrocarbons of Mauritania.
Good morning. I'm Loïc Chapuis. I'm the Senior Vice President for Gas and Low Carbon Energies at Technip Energies, in charge of gas businesses, including GTA FPSO projects.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ayodele Oni. I'm a partner at a law firm in Nigeria, Bloomfield Law Practice. I'm a commercial lawyer. I do legal, regulatory, and transactional advisory. I structure projects across particularly West Africa, LNG projects, gas projects, PPPs. I do a lot of structuring, policy advisory, and help investors internationalize their contracts. Thank you.
All right, thanks very much. So we begin. I'm going to start my question with the MSGBC Basin is poised to be the next African gas hub. How can public and private sectors synergize to ensure a prosperous, sustainable future for the sector? I'd like to pose this straight to Ismail. And Ismail is not here. Mr. Mustafa? Yeah, I'm sorry. Go for it.
Can you hear me? Okay. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to share with you some strategic view on how we see the development of the gas in the region. If you allow me just to give a little bit of context of the region, as you know, recently we made huge gas discoveries in the region, and we are now starting the development of the first project, which is the GTA project between Mauritania and Senegal, that will enhance the cooperation between both countries and give us the opportunity to monetize the gas and to negotiate fair and good contract for our countries. So we think that in this context of the energy transition and this energy crisis in Europe, this is an opportunity for us to better monetize our gas resources and look for funds to accelerate the development of the pending projects that are now facing these new transition challenges. As you explained earlier, GTA is now in progress. We are over 80% progress on phase 1, and we are now working on phase 2 with our partner to meet the target of this window of gas demand and to have gas available for Europe. But I think also it's important for us as a foundation of our local market to develop other projects for the local market, such as the gas to power, but also all these low-hanging fruit opportunities that can be implemented very, very quickly and that can give us more ability to better monetize and negotiate contract with the European countries in this direction.
Thank you so much for that, Mustafa. Thank you very much for that, Mustafa. Thank you. Gaspar, what's your view on that, with the MSGBC being poised to be the next, Africa gas hub?
Morning, everyone. So I suppose being a local sort of engineering service company, our emphasis really is more on repair and maintenance. I think it's all well and good having a brand new shiny asset, but that asset needs to be maintained, and it needs to be maintained at a reasonable cost, and there needs to be some flexibility to reduce the operating costs at a time when, for example, when the gas price drops, which we all know that we are in a cyclic industry. The gas price will not always be this high. And when you have that challenge, then that's a sustainability challenge. That then means that you have to then rely on your local, the competence of your local personnel, the skills, the qualifications of your local workforce, and also your local supply chain. Importing expats does work during the EPC stage. It's not necessarily cost effective during the operating phase. So in terms of governments, what can governments do? I'm looking more obviously at Senegal. I think qualification and certification needs to be focused on a lot more. We're having to send our guys to Ghana and Tunis to get trained on the BOSIET and the CAEBS, which is the very basic training required to go offshore. We're spending about $5,000 for each person. Obviously, that's not sustainable. If you have a team of 20 people, obviously that's, then you then begin to realize the actual expenditure involved. Slinging, rope access, banksmen, things like that, all of that I think we need to really focus on here and just be able to have a system where people can get certified through the usual industry bodies like OPITO. And to do that, there just needs to be a lot of background work. It's a lot of just obviously form filling and just working with the different stakeholders. But yes, so I think a lot of homework is still required, and I think a lot of emphasis needs to be put on the brownfield side of things, which is the repair and maintenance. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Gaspar. Yeah, that was really thoughtful. And what's interesting, you also talk about the investments that you do on your people, your staff, and all of that. And that really speaks to me when it comes to local content, because of course you're training the local people. And speaking of which, I'll come back to that, but speaking of which, this question goes to Dr. Oni. I'm starting with you on this one. What best practice should be enacted to tie the energy sector's boom to social and economic development through local content and otherwise?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think that's an important question. And I'll look at it from the Nigerian perspective too. You want to ensure that productive activities, particularly around your midstream, downstream, you can fabricate, you can ensure that you're not just hewers of wood and drawers of water. You want to be sure that there are productive activities you can process. It's not just sufficient that you generate revenues from your gas. You want to ensure that your people are employed, there's employment, and you have the ability to encourage investment in those sectors that convert your raw gas, for example, to LPG, or you can do CNG. You want to ensure that across that value chain, there's productive activities. Because that's been the bane in Africa, where we sort of seed our natural resources, but there's no connection. So you have a few rich people who make money from that, particularly government, but it doesn't trickle down because you don't have people who are processing that natural resource. You don't have the obligation for international companies to come and set up businesses to process, to convert to useful end products. So I think that's important. You can have legislation that's been done elsewhere. You can have funds. There are developmental funds to encourage or to support small businesses, small, medium-scale enterprises that you can tee off your base resource. Because I think base resources do not give you much if you do not process them in country. What you end up having is capital flight. You will generate income, and I'll give you a sad example. In Nigeria, that's changing now. We have a lot of gas, like you well know. We're a gas province. We have more gas than we do have crude. Gas is produced and exported, and then we buy finished products like LPG. So you generate $1 billion selling gas. You spend $1.350 billion buying finished products. So local content is not just saying it. It's developing capacity, even maybe providing funds under the law where you can encourage businesses and you structure those properly. And you ensure that you have stability of those laws so that people can come in, they know that they can monetize their investments. So I think that's the way I look at it. It's not just talking the talk. You need to walk the talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Oni. Yeah, very well spoken. And I mean, you referenced Nigeria using that as an example, and I'm sure Mustafa has been listening intently and also being the Director General of the hydrocarbons. How are you putting things in place in Mauritania? You don't want to make the mistake Nigeria has made over the years, do you?
Thank you. So I think we really need to avoid the mistakes and to learn from all the benchmarks in terms of local content. It's always difficult to realize the best compromise between accelerating some projects and generating some cash flow for the government to fund prioritized actions, social actions, and at the same time also increasing the local content of the project. So, of course, we in Mauritania, we just finalized 3 main studies with regard to that. The first one is related to the gas master plan, which identified the best options to monetize the gas. The second one is local content strategy to look at the benchmark and to identify what is the best way to proceed with the existing project. And the second one is a strategic vision, integrated all these elements and helping the energy transition and identifying the way forward and the objective in the short, medium, and long term. So, of course, we think that also creating regional markets and enhancing the collaboration between countries can also help in achieving these goals of the local contents and avoiding the mistakes that other countries did in the past.
Thank you for that. Yes, very well thought through, and wishing Mauritania all the best at that. This question I have here is going to Loic, and I hope I've pronounced your name correctly. Will the advent of the new European market demand drive LNG investments and development?
Je vais me permettre de faire cette réponse en français pour Technip Energies, une société française qui est au Sénégal, et pour varier un peu. Pour revenir au LNG et à ce qui se passe en Europe, je voudrais d'abord dire que la demande de LNG, avant l'événement en Ukraine, était déjà en forte croissance. Plusieurs scénarios sont indiqués. Ce qui a été montré par Rystad tout à l'heure montrait une décrue qui était aux environs de 2030. Plusieurs analyses montrent que ça peut être un petit peu poussé. Et donc la demande LNG, indépendamment de ce qui se passe, drivée par la consommation, drivée par la demande en énergie et la croissance de la population, est un marché qui va continuer à grossir pendant encore une bonne décennie. Pour ce qui se passe dans l'Europe, on voit que la dépendance via une énergie liée à un pipe a créé des événements, et je pense que l'Allemagne illustre parfaitement la situation où le pipeline va empêcher de diversifier sa source d'énergie. L'installation étant assez chère et onéreuse, une diversification est toujours difficile à mettre en place. Le LNG apporte cette diversification et cette flexibilité dans le marché, dans la consommation. Et la preuve en est, en urgence, en Europe, on construit des terminaux méthaniers pour essayer d'importer du LNG et diversifier. Aujourd'hui, l'Europe et les événements en Ukraine créent une difficulté d'approvisionnement évidente et l'Europe se trouve, entre guillemets, coincée entre des producteurs qui ont des capacités déjà vendues à long terme sur d'autres clients, ou de se retourner vers des pays qui vont produire plus, notamment les États-Unis, et qui font que le prix de l'énergie sera beaucoup plus cher. Il est évident que cette situation doit être prise, et indépendamment de ce qui se passe en Ukraine, doit être prise comme une opportunité pour l'Afrique, une opportunité pour le bassin ici, avec les découvertes de gaz et tout ce qui peut être fait. Évidemment, pour faire court à la question, oui, les événements en Europe vont driver de nouveaux investissements, dans le domaine du LNG. Et chez Technip Energies, on voit énormément de clients presque s'affoler pour construire rapidement des capacités de LNG et pouvoir fournir les marchés européens, entre autres. Il ne faut pas négliger les marchés asiatiques qui ont toujours besoin d'énergie et l'Afrique qui a besoin aussi d'électrifier plus le pays, le continent. Donc évidemment, le LNG et l'Europe vont driver de nouveaux investissements. Il y a certains discours autour de l'énergie transition et de l'arrêt de financement d'énergie fossile. Il faut rappeler que le gaz, y compris en Europe, est considéré comme une énergie de transition. Et quand on dit énergie de transition, c'est que le gaz est l'énergie qui permet de réduire de plus de 50% la production d'électricité par rapport à du charbon. Définitivement, le gaz et le LNG ont une bonne image et il existe de nombreuses technologies qui permettent de réduire l'empreinte carbone de la production de LNG. Aujourd'hui, la plupart des projets qui sont en train de sortir vont vers une électrification du procédé de fabrication du LNG. On ne brûle plus de gaz pour faire tourner les turbines, on utilise de l'électricité. Et on prend cette électricité qui peut être produite à partir du gaz et on en vient capturer le carbone pour le stocker. Donc définitivement, l'avènement des événements en Europe va driver de nouveaux investissements. Tout ce qui devait être fait en Russie et qui ne sera pas produit sera à faire ailleurs. Et définitivement, ça reste une énorme opportunité pour essayer d'amorcer la pompe et de créer des contrats long terme en Afrique. Voilà.
Interesting view. Thank you so much, Loic. Yeah, that's really well packed. And indeed, you're right. I do know that a couple of countries have been visiting a number of African nations. The president of Italy was in Algeria and probably Nigeria also, or maybe sent his minister, basically just to ensure the security of supply of gas with the Ukraine-Russia situation. But still on that, Per Magnus, from the Rystad Energy chart, you showed us very clearly the potential population explosion in Africa. And yes, the demand in European markets may drive increased LNG investment and development. Of course, interestingly, to be exported to Europe, but you are also a very a fan of consuming internal consumption, domestic consumption. So what's your view on this, still on this question of, European markets driving a demand in LNG investment? What's your view?
Let me first start with a kind of global view, because there's way too little LNG projects coming up in the world. Australia, they are almost done. US, they still have potential. But if you look other than that, of course, Qatar, they have potential. But it's way too, the kind of inventory of LNG projects in the world is not very impressive. And if you look at around Africa, you have the East Mediterranean, you have the Mozambique, and now we have the Mauritania and this region. That is where the recent gas discoveries have been done. So I just think that around Africa, there is much more gas to be found than anybody really has put right down on the paper. Because up to now, everybody has been exploring for oil. But if we start now to explore for gas around Africa, and the entire shelf is more or less unexplored for gas. So I think that there will be a lot of gas potential. And then I think that politicians shouldn't start thinking how much should we maintain in the country. I think that if you go like one decade out in time, you should think that how much should we actually export of this gas. I think that's maybe the starting point, because the gas is just driving a lot of entrepreneurship. A lot of private companies can use the gas, and the national economy is lubricated by the gas you are keeping in the country. So yes, I really understand everything that I've heard here yesterday about keeping the gas in this continent that so badly need all this industrial activity and the power coming from gas, yes.
Thanks, Per Magnus. Yeah, indeed. While I have you, actually, what's your view on exports to regional markets, and fellow African nations play a significant role in the industry's future? What do you think? Will the exports to regional markets around the MSGBC region and possibly within the entire African continent, would that play a significant role in the industry's future, Per Magnus?
Yeah, I think it's something that I haven't thought too much about before, that is actually a potential to that African countries can actually export and trade LNG between them, and I think that's a really right thinking as well. Of course, Europe need LNG, need gas, but every country has to somewhat protect their own kind of energy situation. And I will just give you a little example here. In Norway, we are exporting 3% of our electric power, and it's a big uproar in the people because that pushes up the electricity price. And here we are talking about the same for Africa and the gas. So I think that the experience that we see that countries will have to be a little protective on their energy balance, and that is about energy security. And of course, in an ideal world, we are all trading, and that is the best way for the ideal world. But every country has to care a little more about the energy security. That's what we have seen in Europe. This energy crisis started without any doubt by the fact that Germany and UK cut down their base power generation from coal and nuclear and even gas in the UK. And that triggered this energy crisis that was aggravated by the Ukraine war. But already before the Ukraine war, it was quite dramatic already.
Yeah, that's right. I can attest to that. My electricity price has gone up by 200% in London. But Mustafa, what's your view? I mean, speaking of Mauritania, what would the interest be for you to be exporting to the rest of the African countries regionally, essentially?
Thank you. I think it's a good point to be discussed, how to balance between the domestic market and the export. And I think the analysis is a very clear one, because now we need also to develop this local market and to secure our energy. It's about energy security, which is the same problematic as in Europe. But again, the problem is what is to be done first. I think we need to have some projects and to take the opportunity of this energy crisis in Europe as an accelerator to develop other projects we have pending, and this project also waiting for funding, which is now a problem with this new energy transition. So I think a good opportunity for the region is to develop these regional markets and to see the synergy that can be developed not only in the oil, energy and gas sector, but also in the mining sector. And with this approach, we can have find the right balance between the export and the development of the local market.
All right, thanks very much. I have a question, and anyone can take this really, but I feel it's quite an interesting one. How can LNG be used to channel investment into domestic gas sector of the region, of the MSGBC region? I'll take that question again. How can LNG be used to channel investment? So essentially, the funds, possibly, the revenue gotten from LNG sales, how can that be used into developing domestic gas sector for the region? Who wants to build the cat here? Dr. Oni, is that you?
I think is to create funds that will then be given to prospective prospective developers of other gas-related activities. Because you generate income, you set up funds, you let people use those funds for gas processing, for additional equipment, infrastructure, fabrication across that value chain and across the basin. I think that's one thing you can't do. Because if you leave revenue as revenue alone, you know what it's susceptible to when you have in the hands of politicians, without me saying more. So if you want to develop your gas, you would not just be, because for example, I'll give you an example. There's the NLNG in Nigeria. That's Nigeria's biggest success story around gas. And the 7th train was recently, the financial close for train 7, I think was done May last year or so. You know, income, and Nigeria gets a lot of, because Nigeria is a shareholder, unlike what you had before where you had unincorporated joint ventures. In this case, it's a company, and Nigeria only gets dividends. And Nigeria gets huge amounts, billions of dollars in that revenue. But from such revenue, you can then begin to create silos. You can begin to create other industries where you put money, where you have funds. People can get those funds at cheaper rates. But you have a process where you follow through the sort of business in that same sector. You can have people having LPG plants, mini skids. You can have people with CNG. You understand? A number of, like Nigeria is talking about gas penetration and an expansion program where vehicles can begin to use CNG. And there are a number of vehicles in Lagos already and in some other cities. So if you have income from LNG, which can be huge, you can then let it trickle down into other gas-related sectors or subsectors. That's one thing I think can be done. Thank you. And you have a stable legislation supporting that.
Thank you. Thank you. Gaspar, do you have any thoughts on that?
Thank you very much. Yes, I think there's a lot of talk about pipelines, particularly pipelines to supply gas within the sub-regional market. So I suppose that's something to be considered in terms of pooling the resources to sort of try and develop a pipeline system, but also have a very world-class maintenance regime of these pipelines, because we all know, rightly or wrongly, I don't know whether Putin was right or wrong, he for some reason the Nord Stream 1 keeps needing repairs recently. So of course there's geopolitical issues as well to consider regarding that as well. I think education and training is definitely the way to go. Natural gas and oil won't be here forever in terms of being a viable product, but people will. And I think it's very important, just like I know Norway are doing, in their sovereign wealth fund, they're making a very strong point of actually divesting from oil and gas in terms of making other alternative investments. And I think that's something that has to be really looked at. We shouldn't be in a position, or our kids shouldn't be in a position 50, 100 years down the line where we're just staring out into the abyss, out into the sea, and just looking at empty platforms without anyone having invested in anything else in terms of their education and in terms of their future. So I think it's really important to have a strategy towards that. And I think I don't fully agree as well that we have to purely invest in building up a domestic market for the gas. I think that's very important, but I think we need to invest in other things as well, which obviously plays a big role. I know there's different sectors in Senegal as well, like mining, agriculture. All these things need to be invested in as well, from whatever we make from the LNG.
Thank you. Loic, are you okay for me to challenge you on this question? If you have anything to add to that? No, okay, that's fine. Well, I'm going to take the last question here. So finally, what is the greatest challenge and opportunity you anticipate in this gas export landscape over the coming decade? Loic, now I'm going to start with you on that one.
Je vais commencer par les principaux challenges et essayer de donner une meilleure image ensuite en parlant des opportunités. l'accès au financement est fortement quelque chose dont on a parlé et qui sera et qui est une difficulté. Le financement pour tous ces projets sont assez massifs, demandent des financements parfois externes et des banques ou des opérateurs qui prennent d'énormes risques. Donc forcément cet accès au financement avec les conditions qui sont imposées notamment en Europe sur la partie impact carbone va rendre les choses plus difficiles. Néanmoins, quand on regarde ce qui est capable d'être fait sur la décarbonation, y compris sur la production de LNG, comme j'ai expliqué tout à l'heure, cela va permettre de décoincer le financement et on voit que c'est toujours une offre et une demande. La demande est telle que forcément on trouvera à la fin des investisseurs. Donc c'est le premier challenge. Le deuxième challenge que je vois, ça va être la multitude de projets qui a lieu dans le monde et nous sommes bien placés chez Technip Energies pour le voir, l'accès aux ressources humaines et la volatilité sur la supply chain vient impacter les projets. Le Covid-19 a bien démontré qu'une crise mondiale pouvait avoir un impact sur la delivery de certains projets. Dans les années à venir, nos fournisseurs, les ressources humaines, vont devoir faire face au flot de projets et passer en premier pour pouvoir délivrer en temps et en heure. Plus on met de temps pour faire un projet, plus c'est compliqué et ça coûte cher, et d'un point de vue financement, ça s'en ressent. Donc ça va être clairement quelque chose sur lequel il va falloir investir, et on parlait notamment de la formation et de l'accès au contenu local, qui est très importante pour pallier à ce manque de ressources qui va être un problème dans la prochaine décennie. Je voudrais passer un petit peu aux opportunités. Donc je mentionnais clairement cette manne de LNG qui va pouvoir être exportée, donnera des ressources pour les pays africains, pour sûr. Quand on voit aujourd'hui la façon dont les Européens sont venus aller voir à droite et à gauche s'ils pouvaient se fournir, encore une fois, c'est de l'offre et de la demande. La demande étant forte, le prix de vente sera fort et le retour sur investissement sera d'autant plus meilleur. Et pour ce marché, c'est un marché qui a besoin de visibilité et de reliability, d'être sûr qu'on puisse livrer en temps et en heure sur une période de 30 ans. Des projets comme GTA qui sont en passe d'être arrivés, le FPSO de Technip Energies est sur le point de partir, montrent que le bassin et l'Afrique est capable de faire des grands projets, est capable de livrer pendant longtemps du gaz. Ça donne une alternative extrêmement crédible face à des projets qataris, des projets américains et des projets asiatiques. Et cette crédibilité, elle est clé parce qu'elle va donner un impact sur le financement et sur les taux d'intérêt qui vont être imposés. Donc le financement sera plus facile et surtout ça donnera une crédibilité, une alternative très crédible pour des marchés comme l'Europe et autres qui viendront pouvoir nouer des contrats long terme en Afrique. Donc c'est extrêmement important que ces contrats se déroulent bien. Cette crédibilité est en passe d'être vraiment complètement acquise. On voit les projets qui sont faits et les résultats qui sont donnés. Ça sera une très très grande opportunité pour l'Afrique.
Thank you, Loic. Appreciate it. Gaspar, do you have anything to add to that in terms of challenges and opportunities over the next decade?
Yeah, I think the opportunities are very clear for everyone to see in terms of opportunities to build up a good sort of skill base. The challenges are always going to be with regards to the nature of the industry and in terms of geopolitical issues around the world. But I think we're well placed. Obviously, being in terms of LNG, it is a flexible way to export gas. It's not a fixed pipeline. So if you could easily switch or change markets depending on where the demand is. I think there's also challenges in terms of efficiencies and being flexible and in terms of also challenges of stability and having that enabling environment, which we are lucky to have here in Senegal, where we can work and create, good solutions for the global market within a conducive environment.
Thank you. Per Magnus, your view?
Yeah, the Norwegian Wealth Fund was mentioned here, but Norway is just so different from Africa when it comes to we have the luckiness to have had this development in the 70s and 80s. The Norwegian Wealth Fund is actually something like $200,000 invested per person in foreign stocks in Norway. So that it's tremendous. So most Norwegians have more value in the wealth fund than in their properties and the houses and the gardens. So it's quite tremendous. But I think that this income from LNG export, I think the resource in Africa is the human capital, is the people, is these hardworking people on the streets that try to build some business. So I would think that rather than putting it in some kind of investments fund, you should put them into the people, into the microfinance, and let these fantastic women that is working hard get little small loans and create some microfinance loans. I think really different. That's my kind of gut feeling.
Thanks, Per Magnus. Mustafa?
In terms of challenges, I think the rising funds to finance this project will be a real challenge for the region to develop this project, and also selecting the right concept that can be implemented very quickly and take advantage of the context to put the project on stream. This will be also a challenge. In terms of opportunities, I think we touched a little bit on the FLNG, but I think an onshore LNG could be also a good opportunity for our countries, not only to export the LNG as a flexibility for European market, but also to develop the local market by impacting positively the services and the other related activities in our countries.
Thank you very much, Mustafa. And last but not the least, Dr. Oni, what's your view on the greatest challenge and opportunity that you may anticipate with that gas exports?
Okay, I think one thing is uncertainty, especially prior to this time, the Western world had begun to push against hydrocarbons generally. But with the war in the the Russia war, everyone then began to say, oh, maybe gas is even green energy. Now, the uncertainty around the politics of renewable energy when the war is over, then it becomes a problem. If they begin to say, well, gas is no longer what we think it should be renewable again, that's a problem. But maybe as a lawyer, there's a way you can structure it. If you have long-term contracts from now, there's certain ways you can structure it so that uncertainty, you can take care of it now that it's a burning issue. Everyone wants an alternative. Everyone wants gas. Because of the issues in Ukraine, renewables can't meet that target. That's one. Secondly, that's a big challenge for me. Secondly, politicians, and lack of political will. That for me too is a challenge. I mean, you can talk the talk, but would you walk the talk when it comes to politics and taking the tough decisions? Another thing for me is issues around having sufficient education and knowledge, and then infrastructure. Those two, together with the challenge of financing. In 3 years' time, so there's a project, and I won't go into details. There was a major gas project that needed financing, and there was a challenge because Europe and even China were having challenges financing hydrocarbons until recently with the war. What happens after the war? Would we go back to what the status quo was? So these are, for me, the challenges I see. But the opportunities are the fact that it's a burning issue now and everyone is desperate for energy, we can negotiate. We can negotiate for the medium term. We can negotiate today if we have the political will for the medium term. We can negotiate for even longer term, because it's when people are desperate that you can ask for certain things. After that desperation, then you will be at the receiving end. So I think an opportunity is for us to be able to negotiate internationally, have the right people represent us internationally, and to make the calls and to insist to the West that this is what we want over the next 10, 20 years. And I also think there's the opportunity not to join the bandwagon. Whilst I believe that there should be energy transition, but I think it should not be done at the expense of our economy. There's already energy poverty in West Africa. We do not want to join the West that's not even willing to spend the money for us to transition. So we have huge energy resources. We should at this time be negotiating how those work for us, not the West. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Oni. And with that, we end this session. Thank you, Gaspar, Magnus, Mustafa, Loic, and Dr. Oni. And yes, it's time to negotiate. So we have the power in our hands now. Thank you very much for having us. Thank you.